If you hold Ripple's XRP, then you're going to want to pay close attention to this video because I've consistently been calling for lower lows for quite some time. And we actually did experience a new breakdown all the way to $1.61 before seeing a retrace. The real question that most people have now is whether or not we are going to continue trending to the downside or whether this was the local bottom and now we are going to begin our new trajectory to the upside in a longer term bull market. The question you should have is, should you be bullish or should you be bearish? And guys, I'm not just talking out my butt here, right? I actually did call for this, especially after the Trump bump, seeing the fact that we had new lower highs and Bitcoin was already breaking down. But let's have a listen. Relatively speaking, if Bitcoin dumps, XRP is extremely likely to dump and there's no way around it. And I do not want to sugarcoat it. Our major support range is going to be $2 down to $1.95. However, what I'm really seeing is a crazy amount of support at the $2.40 range. And by the way, with Bitcoin looking as weak as it does and XRP's price action today, this leads me to believe that we're likely going to break below this range, especially because when you paint this picture like we did with Bitcoin. And let's go ahead and grab this line tool. By the way, I gotta actually fix this real quick. There we are. Grab the line tool and drag it through. You can see that we're already experiencing that breakdown. So it leads me to believe we're going to break back down to this range here. And by the way, then the next time that we touch it, it's probably not going to be so pretty. Again, it's looking very similar to Bitcoin. We have 1 touch, 2 touch, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And by the way, on the 9th touch, right, that's so many breakdowns to that range here. This would be what I would call a textbook head and shoulders pattern. Even though technically this was the bottom of the shoulder, it's now official, right? We have one shoulder here, one head here, another shoulder right here. A breakdown right here would take us back down to at least that $1.47 range, and then we'll see what happens there. And by the way, I did post this video on March 7th of 2025, over 1 month ago. You can go ahead and watch that video. This is explosive. XRP holders, pay close attention. Now, since that point in time, after the Trump pump, I have consistently been calling for lower lows. We got that low. It came in at 160, and for whatever reason, we saw a decent amount of support right at this wick. If I go ahead and take a line tool, literally that simple, you can see that we came back and touched the top of the prior high before we broke to new all-time highs up in January of this year. However, many people have been reaching out and asking what's going to occur next. So in this video, I'm going to dive into the price action. I'm going to dive into some key indicators that are showing me this thing has potential to turn around. However, you don't want to jump the gun because it's very much possible this was our local bottom. And I'm going to be very agnostic here. This is currently still an intermediate term downtrend, but I am getting prepared to change my mind if the market environment changes. In other words, I need to hold convictions loosely. I am currently convicted to the downside, but if I see the trend change, guess what? I now want to bet with the trend. Ultimately, I don't want to swim against the currents of the ocean, because I will always lose 10 times out of 10. So if the current changes, I need to swim with it. We are not officially there just yet, but I do believe we're extremely close, which is why this video is so freaking important, especially if you hold a decent amount of XRP or you're looking to buy XRP and add to a position, or even just in general, get into it for the very first time. This video is going to be quite enlightening for you. And so before we dive into all of the technicals and some key indicators that I'm looking at that are going to tell me whether or not I should start entering or wait a little bit longer, ultimately it really comes down to the fact that cash right now is king. Whether you have cash to buy a lower low, that is an amazing situation and an opportunity. Or whether we start to experience a break above a certain range and we go on to print new all-time highs above 340 and potentially even to the $5 range in a very short period of time. Wouldn't you like to be accumulating a lot more XRP at the $2.15 to $2.30 range? So ultimately, cash really is king. And if you're not sitting on enough cash or you want access to more cash, click on the link below for the relief consultants, and you have an opportunity that actually ends in 1 day and 3 hours because they actually have to file this with your taxes. But there is a possibility that if you had W-2 employees in 2021 want. All you have to do is fill out a very quick form, get a simple call from one of our consultants who are lawyers and a team of dedicated professionals to find out within minutes whether you qualify to actually get a treasury check for $150,000. That is apparently the average. Right now, if you were a self-employed person, you can get up to $32,000. Again, this has to be filed by April 15th, which means you have virtually no time left. If you're watching this video, okay, before April 15th, go ahead and just check it out. If you are self-employed or an employer, yes, this is cash that is yours from the Treasury. So it's a really cool opportunity that's going to end extremely soon. And all you have to do is just check to see if something is available. Now, that said, here is a video from our very own Nick Anderson on the channel sharing what this means, why it's so important, how to get access to it and take advantage of it, and actually potentially get a boatload of cash back. Let's have a listen.
April 15th, 2025. This is a huge date because it's the deadline for 2 high-paying tax credits that you probably haven't heard about, but you can still get if you take action right now. We've partnered with the relief consultants who are experts in the tax code who've recovered over $100 million for their clients so far. So if you're a business owner or an entrepreneur, listen up so we can get you help and reach our goal of recovering $10 million for the Bull Runners community before the April 15th deadline. So here's how it works. If you're a business owner who had employees in 2021, then you qualify for an average $150,000 check from the Treasury and possibly more with the Employee Retention Credit Program. So if you were told in the past that you don't qualify, get a second opinion now through the link in the description below this video, because there are rules and regulations that have changed just recently. So there's a high likelihood that you do qualify now. And if you sold your business or you shut it down, you still qualify as long as you were active in 2021. So don't miss out. Schedule an appointment with the link below. Just click business owner with employees if it applies to you. There's also a second tax credit that also ends April 15th. So this is for the bull runners who are self-employed in 2021. So if you were a 1099, not W-2, and self-employment was your primary income, the Treasury check for this tax credit can go up to $32,220 with an average of $17,000. So if you were self-employed in 2021 and want to see if you haven't claimed this credit, which nobody has from our community thus far for some strange reason. We've been talking about this in several videos. I don't know, man, maybe you just want the Treasury to keep your money. But if you want to get money back in your pocket, then schedule a consultation. Don't be lazy. Do this right now before April 15th through the link below. Just click self-employed if you think you qualify for both credits. Let the rep know on the call. And by the way, if you have your tax returns from 2020 and 2021 for this credit, it will be a faster turnaround for you. So have them ready on your call, and they can literally tell you if you qualify on your first call to get you paid. So if you need more money back in your pocket for this bull run, take action right now. Click the link and let's get you paid.
So it's pretty straightforward, ladies and gentlemen. Just click on the link below for the relief consultants. Check it out right here and you will get all of the information you need, and you'll find out relatively quickly whether or not you actually qualify. We have people that were qualifying for $73,000, $500,000, and even $375,000. So go ahead and click the link below if you're wanting access to a bit more cash to either buy the dip or buy into a breakout. But let's get back into the video. Okay, so what I'm going to do is dive into the technicals, because right now there really isn't a bunch of news to cover. There's always news that you can cover, but sometimes the news really is just a bit frothy. It's just a bunch of people looking for something to talk about when really it doesn't mean anything and there's nothing to talk about. Right now we're kind of in that phase of the market. What I will say in general is this: you typically want to stick with the trend. The trend is your friend until the bend at the end. If I were to take a drawing tool, okay, and say, where is the all-time high on XRP in the last year? The answer is right here, right at $3.40, as you can see over on the right. Where's the next major high of the range? Right here, Trump pump, right? Saying that they're going to add it to the strategic crypto reserve. Where is the next high? Here. Okay, the next high is here currently. Does that mean that we're not going to continue trending to the upside? No, that's not not what that means. It simply means that that's the current high on the daily time frame. Okay, so now I have a few different highs of the range. I'm going to go and find the lows of the ranges in between these highs. And as you can see here, yes, this wick is down here, but I'm really going to go ahead and focus on this low right here. Between this and this, I'm going to focus on this low right here. And yes, you could get every single little point on the chart. This, you could argue, was a bull trap, but we're not going to talk about that right now. We're really focusing on the trend. Where's the next major low of the range? These guys right here. And so if I were to ask anyone, okay, looking at this chart that has no expertise whatsoever, okay, and this is really important to think about, where does it look like it's going from a trend perspective? We have a series of what? Without proper training, anyone could say, well, this is lower than this. This is lower than this, this is lower than this, this is lower than this, and this is lower than this. In other words, a series of lower highs and lower lows. This is a textbook intermediate term downtrend, considering the fact that this high came in on January 16th and it has now been almost 90 straight days. Typically in a very strong bull market, okay, you are going to see not the price cool off like this or in an intermediate term downtrend. And more often than not, you will actually see it rally really hard, cool off for 10 days, 30 days, maybe 40 days max before putting in new major highs. In other words, XRP truly needed some time to cool off, and arguably it was at the mercy of the entire market. In other words, Bitcoin is breaking down, everything is breaking down from a macro perspective. Everyone's worried about the Trump tariffs. You've got so many situations going on and occurring all at once that will affect XRP. No matter how you spin it, no matter what you think the utility is, it is at the mercy of the general market. And so it is a good product, right? They do have partnerships. They're in a better position than most cryptos. They just acquired a major brokerage house and clearinghouse for like $1.25 billion with massive institutional adoption that clears $3 trillion per year. I mean, it's great, but at the end of the day, XRP has been struggling. And as you can see here, this seems to be a pretty strong resistance, right? Every time we came into this range, awesome. We sold off, including a bull trap. Up here, you could argue this was the high. So now you're starting to break down. Generally speaking, I would actually like to see XRP above the 260 range and definitely above the 275 range in order to be bullish at all whatsoever. However, sometimes you can get in a little early, okay? And so right here, we have a support, or we did, right, until we broke down. And this was from the 205 range down to the 195 range. This is something we've consistently been talking about. And so if we're looking at this bull trap, it's very much possible and potential this whole range right here is a bear trap, and I'm talking this whole breakdown and touchdown to the 160 range, which I'm kind of shocked we actually had some interesting support and dip buyers there. But then again, when you look at the history, right, we're sitting on a huge wick to the upside to 160 before a breakdown and a sell-off back to 126. Generally speaking, I would have expected a break to at least 147 to 150. We didn't actually get that. We had a lot of dip buyers, which leads me to believe that we have a lot of people that are very interested in XRP below 195. However, with the current trajectory of the trend and the fact that this is still down and the fact that we have no new higher highs in the range, I am still playing relatively cautious. So we're going to go ahead and remove all those drawings, and what I'm going to do is come over to the liquidation levels on CoinGlass. In order to find that, okay, let me go ahead and do this real quick. All you have to do is come to CoinGlass, go to liquidations, and you'll notice that there's all these liquidations, but really you go to Liquidation Map. And from the Liquidation Map, this is actually a very useful tool. I'm kind of shocked that it's not used more often. You come over here to the second one down, which is the Exchange Liquidation Map. And so what this is showing is the total amount of money that is used on futures from traders on Binance, OKX, and Bybit, which share their data. Now, is everything perfect? Do they share every single piece of data? I don't know, not probably. However, it's close enough when you combine all of them. You get a cumulative idea of where the market's heads are at. In other words, if the majority of traders with more money are long, even if it's not the majority, let's say only a third of all the people in the futures market on these three exchanges, okay? In other words, 33% of them have far more money. They are going to dictate and determine where that market could potentially go. It doesn't mean they're always right. Sometimes they can get liquidated. liquidated. Sometimes 1 or 2 or 5 whales will step in, or an exchange with a stupid amount of capital, and just destroy them. And then you see cascading liquidations on the upside or long side because they were wrong, right? They get liquidated. So that said, they have to buy back in higher or lower. That's how these futures work. But what I'm really after is to look at what's going on the 7-day period. This is showing me where all of the money is currently loaded up. In other words, and I'm just removing all the liquidation ranges and just focusing on this big red side and this smaller green side. As you can see here, the current price of Bitcoin is 84,000. And on the right hand side, all the way over, if the price of Bitcoin hits 93.9, okay, or $93,900, you would have about $2.77 billion of liquidations on the shorts. Why? Because the price has pumped hard, and $2.77 billion of trades or traders are wrong. On the flip side over here, look how much bigger this cliff is. In other words, you have $7.16 billion of longs. In other words, if the price of Bitcoin hits $74,000, you're going to have $7 billion liquidated. Now, that's not always the case. That $7 billion doesn't just get liquidated. It's dynamic. People are trading. But this kind of gives me an idea of where the majority of the market participants on a trading perspective are actually at. So right here, we have about 4.5 billion at 78. In other words, if the price of Bitcoin hits $78,000, you have a lot of people that are going to lose money. Now, why does that matter? Because more people are long right now than bearish. And so when I'm looking at this chart, again, look, 74,000 seems to be where we had a few wicks and support. So they believe now we're ready to go back up. Let's see if the same is true for XRP. And when I click on that, remove these guys because they're just kind of messy. You don't need them on. You can see that we have far more people currently long, to the tune of about 286 million, which is a far smaller market and less liquid than Bitcoin. And that's just true across the board, whether it's in market cap, whether it's on futures, whether it's on ETFs. Like, right, XRP doesn't have a spot ETF yet. They do have some futures, but that's separate and different. Now over here, we have $95 million if XRP hits 241 on the shorts. In other words, we have almost more than 2 to 3 times, well, actually more than 2 times, but almost 3 times the amount of longs sitting on XRP, which leads me to believe people are looking at the same chart you and I are looking at right now and saying XRP looks like it's ready to go back up. And so this is the point I'm trying to make. Does it mean that it has to? No. But this is starting to make me feel like maybe we are not getting a new lower low. And someone's going to come into the comments and be like, but you were bearish a year ago, or like 3 months ago, or a week ago. Listen, I couldn't care less. I need to be dynamic and I need to change with the market. I was totally correct in selling into these ranges up here. From 272 was my average out, all the way down to 160. I've been sitting on cash. Now here's the thing. In markets, you have 2 potentialities, 1 constant. The 1 constant is you always move forward in time to the right. Okay, the 2 potentialities are you either go down or you go up, right? And yes, you can go sideways forever, but that usually doesn't happen. You see a trend typically form. So the point I'm trying to make is it's also equally possible we continue breaking down, because that is the path of least resistance right now. But that doesn't mean that you can't have a lot of dip buyers and people that are interested, and market dynamics change, and all of a sudden the market changes, so you have to change with it. I ultimately am here to make money. Okay, so when I look at this chart now, all I'm seeing, okay, was a major support that potentially could become a resistance. I'm going to pull this all the way down to about 195. Consistently, we're seeing support. We broke down for a newer low. We have failed to break out for some new major highs. However, it is possible that with all of those futures traders, things are going to start looking better for XRP now. Still, I would like to see us come back above these highs right here on this downtrend line, and I would definitely like to see the price of XRP break above right here, where we're consistently seeing resistance, right? We consistently saw a resistance. We saw a little inverted shoulder. We're seeing an inverted head. It's possible we come right back down into the 195 range before we go up. And if we see another little shoulder right here and come and touch this place one more time, maybe 216, 215, it's extremely likely we're not only coming into this range, but we're going to make a 100% move to the upside up to probably about 250. This might take a little more time than we like. like. But when I pull up that VRVP, you can see that the 250 range seems to be a pretty strong cliff of volume, or an area of interest for a lot of market participants, between 250 down to 230. So yes, we might see we need a little more time, but this is starting to look really good, which I'm kind of shocked that XRP didn't break down harder, and that's totally fine. I would have expected and liked for it to break down to $1 because I would have bought a boatload more. But either way, I'll still buy into a breakout, because when this thing trends up, I'm making money. If I buy right, I'm making money on the downside or the upside. It doesn't matter. It's like real estate, right? I've talked to some major real estate investors over the years. They all will agree on one point. They might have different business models. They might take on different properties. They might go after distressed assets or corporate or blah, 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 multifamily. All of them agree on one thing, and that is this: you make money on your buy. If you buy right, it's very difficult in real estate to actually lose money, even if you make some poor decisions. Ultimately, if you buy a really distressed asset and you buy right, you still have so much room or a gap to make all of these mistakes and still at least break even. It's very hard to lose money when you buy right, and if anything, that increases your odds of making money. So I like to increase my odds of making money. In other words, if we come back lower, I'm totally happy. I'll buy right and make money. If we come up higher into this range here, I'll buy right and ultimately make money, because now I have a good strong confirmation that we're going to break for higher highs. Still, I think this thing could potentially need more time. But if tomorrow or the next day we start to break into this range at 230, that's going to be relatively exciting, because now we're going to start to break above, these range highs and trend line. This right here, again, would be a bull trap. So I'm just going to go ahead and take this line, or this tool right here, grab it and drag it and just pull it over. Ooh, I don't want text. That would be our bull trap. In other words, people thought you should be bullish, entered a position, they got trapped in their position, and they've consistently been a loss. Here, we might have a potential bear trap. In other words, people are bearish. This is why I'm not taking on a bunch of leverage in a very uncertain environment. Instead, what I want to focus on is buying right. I want to sit on cash and enter at the right time. It doesn't mean I haven't been playing with a little bit of leverage, but it's such a small portion of my portfolio and arguably completely separate from my actual portfolio that it doesn't cost me anything to play in that market just a little because I want to take a bet. But ultimately, betting is not always the best approach. Sometimes waiting is the best approach. And in this case, if we break down below this range low right here at 180, you know what, things are not looking too hot. What I am liking though, and I'm telling you, is the liquidation map. It's looking more bullish than it's looking bearish. I like the fact that we have a potential bear trap. I like the fact that we're yet again touching this range of 215, so a break above would look very hot for XRP. And ultimately, if I pull that VRVP off and just pull up the EMAs, you can see that now we're actually broke above the 20 EMA. We were supported at the 20 EMA. We're hanging out above the 20 EMA. This is still bearish though. We have a 10 and 20 EMA right here. The orange line is the 20, the blue line is the 10, and I would like to see them cross over and the price remain above both. In other words, I'd like to see price above 215. I would like to see the blue line cross above the orange line. I'd like to see the price remain above both, and ultimately I would like for us not to come back below the 195 range. If we break below this 195 range, maybe on a wick to 188 or 186, that is fine, as long as we close at least at 195 on any serious time frame like a daily. I'll be a very happy camper, because that's going to lead me to believe if we come back up and touch the 216, 215 range one last time, we are likely going to experience a breakout, and this would be officially our new directional change in the trend. XRP would consistently be one of the strongest performers of the year and continue to do that. So thanks so much for watching the video, folks. Do what you will with your portfolio on that, but that's my game plan. I'm still sitting on cash and I'm waiting for an opportunity to either enter at a higher high or a lower low. But while we're at it, I went ahead and wrote a book with the team called Altcoin Secrets, and inside you'll unlock 23 secrets to pinpoint the next explosive altcoins, time your entries, build a bulletproof portfolio, outsmart the 99%, and become one of the top 1% in all of crypto. We share everything, right? This is going to be your guidebook to potentially becoming a crypto millionaire. It doesn't mean you're guaranteed to, but this is the type of stuff that's made us a lot of money over the years when it comes to choosing altcoins and cryptos. So go ahead and click on the Bull Runners / altcoin secrets link down below to get the free ebook. All you have to do is click this link, enter your email, and you're good to go. It will be sent to your inbox. So thanks so much for watching, and I will see you in the next video, my friend. Goodbye.